Just sign it over, Michelle. It's the least you can do for family. My husband Derek said this while pouring himself a scotch at 10 a.m., as casually as if he were asking me to pass the salt. Behind him, his brother Brandon stood in the doorway of my Lakehouse office, arms crossed, wearing that same entitled smirk I'd grown to recognize over the past year. Actually, Brandon's wife Tiffany chimed in, from where she'd made herself comfortable on my vintage leather sofa. We'll need it by next Friday. The wedding planner needs to confirm the venue, and this place is absolutely perfect for the reception. The contract I'd been reviewing for the Michigan automotive supplier slipped from my hands. $18 million in merger advisory fees scattered across my mahogany desk. I sat there in my home office overlooking Lake Michigan, trying to comprehend what was happening. This Lakehouse, with its private beach and custom-built dock, represented 12 years of sacrifices. 12 years of building my financial consulting firm from a spare bedroom operation to a powerhouse that Fortune 500 companies called when they needed problems solved. I'm sorry, what? The words came out steadier than I felt. Inside, my stomach was churning like the lake during a storm. Before we continue, if you've ever had family exploit your success while contributing nothing themselves, please consider subscribing. Your support helps share stories about reclaiming your power. Derek didn't even turn around from the bar cart. Brandon and Tiffany are getting married in September. They need a venue, and this place is sitting empty most weekends anyway. You're always working in Chicago. Just transfer the deed to them. It's not like you'll miss it. Not like I'd miss it. The Lakehouse I'd purchased 5 years ago after my biggest client signing. The retreat I designed room by room, where I'd hosted company retreats that sealed multi-million-dollar deals. The sanctuary where I'd recovered from my father's death, watching sunsets over water that reminded me of his favorite fishing spot. At 38, I'd built something extraordinary. Morrison Financial Advisory employed 15 specialists whose expertise I'd personally cultivated. Last quarter alone, we'd facilitated 3 major mergers that kept hundreds of jobs intact while maximizing shareholder value. The Wall Street Journal had featured me in their Women Reshaping Finance series just 2 months ago. Now I stood in the great room I'd furnished, with pieces from estate sales and auctions, each one a trophy from another successful quarter, watching my husband of 8 years casually auction off my life's work to his unemployed brother. Derek. I set down my reading glasses with deliberate care. This Lakehouse is in my name. I purchased it with my money. It's not community property to give away. We're married, he replied, finally turning to face me with the expression of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. What's yours is ours, and family helps family. Brandon needs this. Brandon pushed off from the doorframe, his designer sneakers squeaking on my original hardwood floors. Come on, Michelle, don't be difficult. Tiffany's parents are already contributing the catering budget. The least you can do is provide the venue, unless you want everyone thinking you're too selfish to help your own family. Tiffany was already on her phone, taking photos of my living room. We'll need to move some of this furniture out, she mused. Too dark for the aesthetic we're going for. Maybe we can sell some of it to offset our honeymoon costs? The audacity made my vision blur. But what struck me harder was Derek's nod of agreement, like her suggestion was perfectly reasonable. I have the Craftsman Industries meeting in 2 hours, I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. Their entire restructuring plan depends on this presentation. I can't. Then you'd better prioritize, Brandon interrupted. Family or work, Michelle? Make your choice. The silence that followed felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Derek watched me with something between challenge and certainty, absolutely convinced I'd fold. After all, I always had before. Every family dinner where I bit my tongue when his mother criticized my career. Every holiday where I smiled through comments about how I'd be prettier if I worked less. Every birthday of his that I'd arranged elaborate celebrations for while mine passed with a grocery store cake and a distracted happy birthday text. I need to make some calls. I heard myself say. Derek's shoulders relaxed. He'd won, he thought. Smart choice. Brandon, let's grab lunch and discuss the timeline. They left my Lakehouse like conquerors claiming territory, Brandon's hand already measuring wall spaces for his wedding decorations, Tiffany downloading Pinterest boards of reception layouts. Derek kissed my cheek with the mechanical precision of habit, tasting of expensive scotch I'd bought for celebrating client wins, not for weekday morning betrayals. I stood alone in my sanctuary, listening to their cars crunch down my gravel driveway and pulled out my phone, but I didn't call my assistant to reschedule meetings. I called someone else entirely, Madison Harper Law. The receptionist's crisp voice was exactly what I needed. "This is Michelle Morrison. I need to speak with Madison immediately. Tell her it's regarding asset protection and family law." Madison had been my attorney since I'd started the business. The shark who'd structured everything to protect my company from exactly this kind of situation. What Derek didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Madison and I had planned for every contingency, including this one. "Michelle." Madison's voice came on the line within seconds. "What happened?" "They want the Lakehouse. Derek's signing it over to his brother for a wedding venue." The words tumbled out. "Like it's his to give." A pause. Then Madison's laugh, sharp as broken glass. "Oh, this is going to be fun. Come to my office. Bring every document related to that property. We're going to show them exactly what happens when they try to steal from Michelle Morrison." The Craftsman Industries meeting went flawlessly, probably because rage makes an excellent fuel for precision. I restructured their entire supply chain, saved them $12 million annually, and secured their commitment for a 5-year advisory contract. All while my phone buzzed with increasingly demanding texts from Derek about when I'd visit the county recorder's office to transfer the deed. By 6 p.m., I sat in Madison's downtown Chicago office, surrounded by documents that told the real story of my marriage. "The Lakehouse deed is exclusively in your name," Madison confirmed, her manicured nail tapping the property records. "Purchased before marriage with funds from your business account. Illinois isn't a community property state, and you have a prenup that explicitly separates business assets. Derek has zero legal claim." "He doesn't know about the prenup details," I admitted. "I tried to explain it when we signed, but he just waved it off, said he trusted me." "Trusted you not to enforce it, you mean?" Madison pulled out another file. "Now let's talk about something else. The joint accounts, the credit cards he's been using, the country club membership. Want to guess who's been funding Brandon's lifestyle for the past year?" She slid bank statements across her desk. "Transfers to Brandon. $5,000 here, $8,000 there. Cash withdrawals that corresponded with Brandon's social media posts about weekend trips to Vegas, new watches, expensive dinners. Derek's been giving him our money?" "Your money," Madison corrected. "The joint account you deposit into monthly for household expenses, which apparently includes bankrolling his unemployed brother's lifestyle. There's almost $90,000 gone in the past 14 months. The floor seemed to tilt. I'd been working 80-hour weeks, missing my best friend's wedding, skipping my own birthday dinner, all to maintain our lifestyle and build security. And Derek had been siphoning it off to Brandon like I was some kind of unlimited ATM. "There's more." Madison's expression turned grim. "I did some digging after you called. Brandon filed for bankruptcy 8 months ago. He owes $200,000 in credit card debt and back rent. Tiffany's family isn't contributing to any wedding. Her parents cut her off 2 years ago when she dropped out of law school to become an influencer." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. They need the Lakehouse because they can't afford an actual venue. They need the Lakehouse, period. I'd bet money they're planning to live there, not just use it for a wedding. Madison leaned forward. "The question is, what do you want to do about it?" I thought about Derek's casual dismissal that morning, Brandon's entitled smirk, Tiffany photographing my belongings like they were already hers to sell. The systematic way they'd planned this ambush, probably over family dinners I'd missed because I was working to pay for the life they felt entitled to. "I want them to understand exactly who they're dealing with," I said, "and I want everything that's mine protected from their reach." Madison smiled, the expression of a predator spotting prey. "Then let's get to work." Over the next 48 hours, I transformed from accommodating wife to strategic warrior. Madison worked her magic with paperwork while I executed the plan we designed with the precision of a corporate takeover. Step 1, I called a locksmith to change every lock on the Lakehouse. Professional grade, the kind that couldn't be picked by amateurs or bypassed with old keys. Step 2, I contacted my bank and froze the joint accounts, then transferred my regular deposits to a new account in my name only. Every credit card Derek carried, every automatic payment he relied on, severed with a few keystrokes. Step 3, I hired a property management company with one specific instruction. No one enters the Lakehouse without my explicit written permission. No exceptions, no family emergencies, no sob stories. Step 4, I documented everything. Every text from Derek demanding I sign over the deed. Every voicemail from Brandon getting progressively more aggressive. Every Instagram post from Tiffany showing our future wedding venue to her 847 followers. On Thursday morning, I drove to the Lakehouse alone. The 3-hour drive from Chicago gave me time to think, to remember why I'd fought so hard for this place. The sunrise over Lake Michigan as I pulled into the driveway felt like a benediction. I spent the day there, walking through rooms that held pieces of my soul. The library where I'd taught myself advanced financial modeling. The deck where I'd celebrated my first $1 million contract with champagne and tears of relief. The master bedroom where I'd grieved my father, wrapped in the quilt my grandmother made, staring at water that reminded me of everything I'd lost and everything I'd built in spite of that loss. By evening, I was ready. Derek's call came at 6:47 p.m., right on schedule. "Michelle, where are you?" We were supposed to meet Brandon and Tiffany for dinner to discuss the venue transfer. "I'm at the Lakehouse," I said calmly. "Perfect. We'll head there now. Brandon wants to take measurements for the tent setup." "No." Silence. Then, "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no one is coming to the Lakehouse. I've changed the locks. The property is secured. And I'm done pretending this is a reasonable request." His laugh was uncertain. "Michelle, stop playing games. This is important." "You're right. It is important, which is why I've made some important decisions." I pulled out the list Madison and I had prepared. First, the joint bank accounts are frozen and will be closed tomorrow. Second, all credit cards in your name connected to my accounts have been canceled. Third, the Lakehouse will never under any circumstances be given to Brandon and Tiffany. "You can't." "I can. I have. And Derek?" I paused, looking out at the lake turning gold in the sunset. "I want a divorce." The explosion was immediate. Shouting, threats, accusations of cruelty and selfishness. Through it all, I stayed calm. Years of negotiating with hostile executives serving me well. "You'll be hearing from my attorney," I said when he finally paused for breath. "Madison Harper. I believe you remember her from when we signed our prenup." "The prenup doesn't matter. We're married. What's yours is mine." "Actually, you should read it again, particularly the section about business assets and property acquired through business income. Also the infidelity clause, though we can discuss that later." "Infidelity? I never." "No, but you've been in a financial affair with your brother for over a year, funneling my money to him without my knowledge or consent. It's all documented, Derek. Every transfer, every lie, every dollar stolen." Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, dropping the bluster for something more calculating. "Michelle, let's talk about this. Come home. We can work this out." "I am home. This lake house, this sanctuary you tried to steal, this is my home now." I ended the call and blocked his number. Then Brandon's, then Tiffany's. One by one, I excised them from my digital life with the same efficiency I brought to corporate restructuring. My phone rang immediately with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then another, and another. On the fourth try, I answered, "Michelle." Derek's mother, Patricia, her voice dripping with the disapproval I'd endured for 8 years. "What is this nonsense about divorce? Derek is devastated. How can you be so selfish over a house?" "Patricia, with all due respect, this conversation is between Derek and me. Family is involved when one member acts irrationally. Brandon and Tiffany have been planning their special day for months. You're ruining everything out of spite." The accusation should have stung. Instead, it bounced off the armor I'd finally allowed myself to build. "They've been planning to steal my property for months. There's a difference. Steal? It's a wedding venue. You're barely there anyway, always working, neglecting your husband. Maybe if you'd been a better wife, he wouldn't need to rely on family so much." And there it was. The real issue that had lurked beneath 8 years of passive-aggressive comments. I worked too much, achieved too much, made Derek look small by comparison, and that was my failing, not his. "I'll be a better ex-wife than I ever was a wife," I said. Goodbye, Patricia. That night, I slept in my Lakehouse bed for the first time in months, wrapped in silence and the gentle sound of waves. No Derek snoring beside me. No 3 a.m. texts about client emergencies. Just peace. Friday morning brought new developments. Madison called at 8 a.m. sharp. Derek's lawyer called. He wants to negotiate. Already? Apparently the reality of canceled credit cards hit hard. He tried to take Patricia to lunch yesterday and his card was declined in front of the country club crowd. The image made me smile despite everything. Derek, who'd built his entire identity around being the successful architect, the man who could afford to be generous, humiliated at the institution that mattered most to his mother. What's he offering? Nothing. He's demanding joint custody of the Lakehouse, 50% of your business assets, and spousal support because, and I quote, "he supported your career by maintaining the household." I actually laughed. Maintained the household? We had a cleaning service I paid for. Meals were either takeout or me cooking when I had time. What exactly did he maintain? His ego, apparently. But here's the interesting part. I did some more digging into Brandon's situation. Remember that bankruptcy filing? Yes. He listed Derek as a creditor. Your husband loaned him $50,000 2 years ago. From where, Michelle? The equity line of credit. The one Derek had said was for home improvements that never materialized. He took out a loan against our Chicago condo? Against the condo you own, yes. Which means he committed fraud, technically. Took a loan against property that wasn't his to use as collateral. The betrayal kept layering, each revelation worse than the last. Can we use this? Oh, we're absolutely using this. Derek's looking at potential legal consequences if he pushes this divorce into hostile territory. I'm thinking we leverage it for a clean break. He walks away with nothing, and we don't pursue charges. And if he doesn't agree, Madison's pause was deliberate, then we burn it all down and salt the earth. Your choice. I looked out at the lake, watching morning sun paint the water in shades of copper and gold. This view, this peace, this life I'd built, it was worth protecting at any cost. Give him 24 hours to accept the clean break. After that, we go scorched earth. The next 2 days passed in surreal calm. I worked from the Lakehouse, taking video calls against the backdrop of floor-to-ceiling windows and lake views. My team noticed the change in scenery but asked no questions. We were in the middle of closing the Craftsman deal, and my focus was razor sharp. Brandon tried a different tactic on Saturday. He showed up at the Lakehouse with a police escort, claiming he had a right to access for his wedding planning. The officer who arrived was professional, but clearly uncomfortable. Ma'am, Mr. Morrison says he's family and needs access to prepare for a wedding venue. I handed him the property deed. I'm the sole owner of this property. I've never given Mr. Brandon Morrison permission to use it as a venue or for any other purpose. He's trespassing. Brandon's face turned an impressive shade of red. You can't do this! Derek promised. We've already sent save the dates with this address. That sounds like a Brandon problem, I said calmly. Officer, I want him removed from my property and a formal trespass warning issued. The officer looked between us, then at the deed in his hand. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is private property, and the owner has the right to deny access. This is insane. Michelle, you're destroying our family over a piece of property. No, I corrected. You tried to destroy my property rights for a party. There's a difference. As the officer escorted Brandon to his car, a BMW I now realized I'd probably paid for through Derek's loans, my phone rang. Madison with news. Derek accepted the terms. Clean divorce, he gets nothing, and you won't pursue fraud charges. He's signing the papers Monday. Relief washed over me, but it was tinged with something else. Sadness, maybe. Not for Derek or the marriage, but for the years I'd wasted making myself smaller to accommodate his ego. There's one condition, Madison continued. He wants to make a statement to mutual friends to save face. He's telling people the divorce was mutual, that you both wanted different things. Let him have his story. I don't care what he tells people. Actually, you might want to care about this part. He's also claiming you were the one having an affair with your clients, that your success was built on inappropriate relationships. The calm I'd maintained shattered. He's what? Yeah. Patricia is already spreading it through her social circle. The narrative is that you're a ruthless career woman who slept her way to success and abandoned your family when they needed you. This was a level of betrayal I hadn't anticipated, attacking my reputation, my business, the integrity I'd built my entire career on. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was attempted professional murder. Can we sue? For defamation? Possibly, but it might draw more attention to the accusations. These things have a way of spreading, even when they're proven false. I stood on my deck, gripping the railing so hard my knuckles went white. The lake was choppy today, matching my mood. Waves crashed against the shore with increasing violence as a storm rolled in from the west. What do you recommend? Madison's voice carried a hint of something dark and satisfied. I recommend we show them exactly who Michelle Morrison is. Not through lawsuits or defending yourself against lies, but through undeniable proof of your character and success. How? Remember that Wall Street Journal reporter who interviewed you? The one writing the follow-up piece on women in finance? I think it's time she heard the full story. Not a he said, she said divorce drama, but the real story of how you built your company, your assets, and how certain people tried to steal it all. The idea crystallized in my mind. Not revenge, but truth. The most powerful weapon against lies. Set it up, I said. The interview happened the following Wednesday in my Lakehouse. The journalist, Rebecca Chen, had been professional during our first interview, but this time there was something different in her eyes when I opened the door. She'd done her homework. "Miss Morrison, thank you for agreeing to this follow-up." She settled into the chair I indicated, her gaze taking in the home office, visible through the doorway, the wall of finance texts, the framed photos of me with CEOs and board members. "I understand there have been some significant changes in your personal life." "There have been changes?" I agreed, and I think they're relevant to the story you're writing about women building success in male-dominated fields. Over the next 3 hours, I told her everything. Not as a victim, but as a businesswoman explaining a hostile takeover attempt that had failed. I showed her the documentation of Brandon's bankruptcy, Derek's fraudulent loans, the systematic theft of my money. I explained the attempted property seizure, the false accusations, the character assassination. But more importantly, I showed her my business records. Every client I'd won through strategy and expertise. Every merger I'd facilitated through analysis and negotiation. Every success built on nothing but skill, determination, and refusal to be diminished. They wanted to reduce my success to something scandalous because they couldn't replicate it, I told Rebecca. My husband and his family couldn't understand that a woman could build an empire without some secret advantage, some shortcut, some man paving the way. So they created a narrative that made sense to them, that I must have cheated somehow, that I didn't deserve what I'd earned. Rebecca's pen flew across her notepad. And the Lakehouse? This property they tried to claim? This represents everything I've achieved. Every hour I worked while others slept. Every deal I closed while others said it was impossible. Every time I bet on myself when the world suggested I should be smaller, quieter, less ambitious. I gestured to the windows, the lake beyond. This isn't just a house. It's proof that I was right to trust myself. The article ran 2 weeks later, just as Derek was preparing his narrative for the local social scene. Financial powerhouse faces family betrayal. How Michelle Morrison fought back against those who tried to steal her success. Rebecca had been thorough and devastating. She'd interviewed my clients, who spoke glowingly of my professionalism and expertise. She'd contacted the Wall Street firms I'd worked with, who confirmed every success was earned through merit. She'd even found Derek's former colleagues, who quietly admitted he'd struggled with his wife's success, had made comments about her getting lucky or having connections. The article included a sidebar about the attempted property theft, Brandon's bankruptcy, and the false affair accusations. All factual, all documented, all destroying the narrative Derek and Patricia had tried to build. My phone exploded with messages, clients assuring me of their continued confidence, industry colleagues expressing outrage on my behalf. Even my mother, calling from her retirement community in Arizona, crying with pride over how I'd stood up for myself. But the most satisfying message came from an unexpected source. Patricia. "Michelle, we need to talk. This article is destroying Derek's reputation. People are calling him a freeloader and a liar. You need to issue a retraction." I was in my Lakehouse office, reviewing contracts for a new client worth $25 million in advisory fees. The afternoon sun streamed through windows that were mine, in a house that was mine, in a life I'd reclaimed. "Patricia, I didn't write the article. I simply told the truth when asked." "The truth? You've made our family look like criminals." "I documented what happened. If that makes you look like criminals, perhaps that's something to reflect on." Her voice dropped to that manipulative tone I'd heard so many times before. "Think about Derek. He's struggling, Michelle. He lost his job because of this publicity. Brandon and Tiffany canceled their wedding. The family is falling apart. Derek lost his job because his firm doesn't want to be associated with fraud and theft. Brandon and Tiffany couldn't afford a wedding they'd planned to finance with my property. These are consequences of their choices, not my revenge. Have you no compassion? No forgiveness?" I thought about that question seriously. Did I? Could I forgive 8 years of being diminished, of having my success resented, of being treated like a bank account with a pulse? Could I forgive the systematic attempt to steal everything I'd built? "I have compassion," I said finally, "for the woman I used to be, who thought making herself smaller would make others more comfortable. For every woman who's been told her success is somehow wrong or threatening. For anyone who's had family treat their achievements as communal property to be redistributed." That's not an answer. Yes, it is. I forgive myself for staying so long. That's the only forgiveness that matters. I ended the call and blocked her number. Then I opened my email to find a message from Marcus Thornfield, the CEO of one of my biggest clients. "Michelle, I've been following your situation in the press. I'm impressed by your grace under fire. Would you be interested in consulting on our expansion into the Asian markets? 6-month contract, your rate plus 20%, and we'd want you based in Hong Kong. Think about it. Hong Kong. 6 months. A chance to build something even bigger, to prove that Derek's attempts to destroy my reputation had only made it stronger. I looked around my Lakehouse office, at the life I'd fought to protect. This sanctuary would be here when I returned. But opportunities like this, they required the kind of boldness I'd finally allowed myself to embrace. I typed my response. I'm very interested. Let's discuss terms. 3 months later, I stood in my Hong Kong office, 47 floors above Victoria Harbor, closing the deal that would triple my company's international presence. The Thornfield expansion had been challenging, complex, and absolutely exhilarating. Every negotiation, every strategy session, every successful milestone reminded me why I'd fought so hard to reclaim my life. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Derek signed final divorce papers. It's done. Congratulations on your freedom. Freedom. The word tasted sweet, like the expensive champagne I'd ordered to celebrate this latest contract signing. But Derek's shadow had one more surprise in store. That evening, as I returned to my temporary apartment in Central, I found an email waiting. Not from Derek himself. He was too smart for that, but from a mutual friend, forwarding something I thought you should see. It was a blog post. Derek had started writing, apparently. A blog about surviving a marriage to a narcissist and reclaiming masculinity after being financially abused. I read through it with a mixture of disbelief and dark amusement. He'd painted himself as the victim of my ambition, the loyal husband who'd supported my career only to be discarded when I no longer needed him. He claimed I'd isolated him from friends, controlled all the money, and refused to let him have any say in major decisions. The comment section was filled with supportive messages from men who related to his story. They called me a castrating career woman, said I represented everything wrong with modern femininity, declared that Derek was brave for speaking his truth. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt nothing but pity. This was his legacy, a blog post rewriting history for strangers who would never know the truth, a desperate attempt to be the hero of a story where he'd been the villain. I didn't respond, didn't engage, didn't waste energy on correcting a narrative that would only matter to people who didn't matter to me. Instead, I forwarded it to Madison with a simple message. Save this. If he violates the non-disparagement clause in the divorce agreement, we'll need it. Her response was immediate. Already downloaded and documented. Want me to send a cease and desist? I thought about it. Thought about Derek hunched over his laptop, crafting these elaborate lies to make himself feel better. Thought about the kind of man who would destroy his ex-wife's reputation because he couldn't build his own success. No, let him have his blog. Let him tell his story to whoever will listen. The truth is already out there, documented in the Wall Street Journal, confirmed by everyone who matters. His fiction can't change facts. And that was the last time I thought about Derek Morrison for months. The Hong Kong assignment ended successfully in September. The Thornfield expansion exceeded projections by 40%, and my company's international reputation was solidified. I returned to Chicago with 3 new major clients and a job offer from Thornfield to serve as their permanent Asia-Pacific consultant. I declined. As much as I'd enjoyed Hong Kong, I'd missed something during those months abroad. I'd missed my Lakehouse, my sanctuary, the place that represented everything I'd overcome. The drive from Chicago to the Lakehouse in early October was like coming home to myself. The trees had turned, painting the landscape in golds and crimsons. The lake sparkled under autumn sun, and as I pulled into my driveway, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace. I'd been there less than an hour when a car pulled up. Sarah, my best friend from college, who'd stood by me through the divorce, who'd sent care packages to Hong Kong filled with American snacks and sarcastic cards. Welcome home! She burst through the door with a bottle of wine and a knowing smile. Tell me everything. And I mean everything. We settled on the deck, wrapped in blankets against the October chill, and I told her about Hong Kong, the contracts, the success. But mostly, I told her about the feeling of building something that was purely mine, untainted by anyone's resentment or entitlement. You know, Derek's blog got shut down, Sarah said casually, pouring us both more wine. What? Yeah. Apparently, someone reported it for harassment and defamation. The platform removed it for violating their terms of service. She grinned. Couldn't have been Madison, could it? I smiled into my wine glass. Wouldn't know anything about that. Well, there's more. Brandon and Tiffany did get married, apparently. City Hall, no reception. They're living with Patricia now, all 3 of them in that house in Connecticut. The image was almost too perfect. Derek's mother, who'd spent 8 years criticizing me for not being domestic enough, now stuck with her son, his brother, and her daughter-in-law in daily proximity. What about Derek? Last I heard, he's working at a small firm in Connecticut. Residential work. Nothing like the prestige he used to have. Lives in Patricia's basement. Drives a used Honda because he can't afford anything else. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of the whole saga. Tired of caring about people who'd never valued me. I'm done with all of them, I said. Done thinking about it, talking about it, letting it take up space in my head. They're irrelevant to my life now. Sarah raised her glass. To irrelevance, and to the best revenge, which is living well. We clinked glasses as the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. This view, this moment, this peace, it was worth every fight, every hard decision, every moment of standing alone. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Michelle Morrison, a woman's voice, professional and warm, speaking. This is Jennifer Walsh from Goldman Sachs. We've been following your career with great interest, particularly your recent international work. We'd like to discuss a position as Senior Director of Global Financial Strategy. Would you be available for a conversation? Goldman Sachs. The pinnacle of financial institutions, offering me a position that would cement my reputation as one of the top strategists in the industry. I looked at Sarah, who was watching me with curious eyes, looked at my Lakehouse, my sanctuary, looked at the lake, constant and faithful, reflecting the last light of day. I'm very interested, I told Jennifer Walsh, but I have some conditions. I maintain my consulting firm, I work remotely from Michigan 3 days a week, and I'm not relocating to New York full-time. A pause. Then, we can work with that. Your reputation precedes you, Miss Morrison. We're willing to be flexible for the right talent. After ending the call, I sat in silence for a moment. Then I started laughing. Deep, genuine laughter that came from a place of pure joy. Good news? Sarah asked. The best news. I'm about to have everything Derek said was impossible. Success on my terms, in the place I love, with complete control over my life and my career. You know what this means, right? Sarah leaned forward with a mischievous glint in her eye. When word gets out, and it will, Derek and his family are going to realize they threw away their golden ticket. You're about to become even more successful, even more powerful, and there's nothing they can do about it. She was right, but more importantly, there was nothing I needed to do about them. No revenge plot, no public vindication, no dramatic confrontation. Their knowledge of my success would be punishment enough. The real victory wasn't in their downfall. It was in my rise, completely independent of their existence. That night, alone in my Lakehouse, I made a list. Not of grievances or regrets, but of goals. The Goldman Sachs position was just the beginning. I had plans. Expand my firm internationally, establish a scholarship fund for women in finance, maybe write a book about building success while protecting yourself from those who want to exploit it. The future stretched out before me, full of possibility and entirely my own. 6 months later, the Goldman Sachs appointment was announced in the Wall Street Journal. My phone exploded with congratulations from colleagues, clients, and industry leaders. The article included a photo of me in my Lakehouse office, the lake visible through the windows behind me, a deliberate choice that said everything about where I'd come from and where I was going. I didn't hear from Derek, didn't hear from Brandon or Tiffany or Patricia. Their silence was more satisfying than any confrontation could have been. But I did hear from someone unexpected. Miss Morrison, this is Officer Davidson from the Lake County Sheriff's Department. We met last year when you had me remove a trespasser from your property. I remember, officer. Is there a problem? Not exactly a problem, more of a courtesy call. We've had someone watching your property, sitting in a car on the public road using binoculars. Neighbor called it in, concerned about a potential burglary case. My stomach tightened. Did you identify them? Yes, ma'am. Derek Morrison, your ex-husband, according to our records. He hasn't set foot on your property, so there's no legal violation. But I thought you should know. Derek, watching my Lakehouse from the road, watching the life he'd tried to steal, now forever out of his reach. Thank you for letting me know, officer. If he escalates to trespassing, I'll call immediately. After hanging up, I walked to my window, looking out at the road where Derek had apparently been sitting. Part of me wanted to feel afraid or violated. Instead, I felt something closer to pity. He'd had everything. A wife who loved him, who supported his dreams, who built an empire that could have secured both our futures. And he'd thrown it away because he couldn't handle being married to someone more successful than him. Now he sat in a used Honda, using binoculars to peek at a life that could have been his, if only he'd valued partnership over pride. I closed the curtains and returned to my desk, where the Goldman Sachs contract awaited my signature. Derek could watch from the outside all he wanted. He'd never touch this life again. The scholarship fund I'd established launched that fall. The Morrison Women in Finance Scholarship, providing full tuition and mentorship to undergraduate women pursuing careers in financial consulting. The first recipient was a brilliant 19-year-old from Ohio whose father had died when she was young, leaving her to finance her own education. Her thank you email made me cry. Happy tears, the kind I hadn't allowed myself in years. Miss Morrison, you've changed my life. I was going to drop out, get a job, forget about my dreams. Now I can finish my degree and become the consultant I've always wanted to be. Thank you for showing me that women can build empires and that success isn't something to apologize for. I printed that email and framed it in my office, next to my degrees and awards. It meant more than any professional accolade ever could. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I hosted a party at the Lakehouse. Not for clients or business contacts, but for the women who'd supported me through everything. Sarah, Madison, my assistant Rebecca, my mother who flew in from Arizona, and a dozen others who'd stood by me when my world was falling apart. We filled the house with laughter and champagne, dancing on the deck as the sun set over the lake. At one point, Sarah pulled me aside. You know everyone's talking about you, right? The finance world, I mean. They're calling you the woman who turned betrayal into a blueprint for success. I didn't set out to be anyone's blueprint. I just refused to let them destroy me. That's exactly why you're inspiring. You didn't just survive, Michelle. You thrived. You took their worst and turned it into your best. Later that evening, as guests mingled and music played, I found myself alone on the deck, looking at the stars reflected in the lake. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Marcus Thornfield, checking in on the Asia-Pacific expansion and floating the idea of a permanent advisory board position. Behind me, I could hear my mother laughing at something Madison said. Could hear music and conversation and life, real life, built on truth and genuine connection. This was what they'd tried to take from me. Not just property or money, but the fundamental right to build something beautiful and claim it as my own. I thought about Derek watching from his car, about Brandon and Tiffany cramped in Patricia's house, about all the ways their greed had backfired. Their punishment wasn't anything I'd done to them. It was simply having to live with the consequences of their choices while watching me flourish despite their best efforts to bring me down. The party wound down around midnight. After the last guest left, I walked through my lake house, picking up glasses and plates, restoring order to my sanctuary. Every room held memories now, not of Derek and his betrayal, but of the life I'd built after him. In the master bedroom, I opened the drawer where I kept important documents: the divorce decree, the property deed, the Goldman Sachs contract, but also something else, a letter I'd written to myself the day I'd changed the locks, the day I decided to fight back. Dear future Michelle, it read, if you're reading this, you made it. You stood up for yourself. You refused to be diminished. You protected what was yours and built something even better. Remember this moment. Remember this strength. You are enough. You always were, and no one can take that from you. Love, present Michelle. I folded the letter and placed it back in the drawer. That woman who'd written it, scared but determined, hurt but unbroken, she'd be proud of who I'd become. My phone buzzed one last time that night. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Hello? Michelle? Derek's voice slurred slightly. Drunk, probably. I saw the Goldman announcement, saw the scholarship fund, saw everything you've become. I should have hung up, should have blocked the number, but something made me listen. I was wrong, he continued, about everything. I thought your success was taking something from me, but it was just making us both better. I see that now. Too late, but I see it. Derek, it's midnight. What do you want? I want. He trailed off. I want you to know I'm sorry. For all of it. The Lakehouse, Brandon. The lies. You deserved better than what I gave you. The apology I'd never expected to hear, delivered drunk in the middle of the night, a year too late to matter. I accept your apology, I said, surprising myself. Not because it changes anything, but because holding on to anger only hurts me. You made your choices. I made mine. We both have to live with the consequences. Are you happy? He asked, and there was something genuinely curious in his tone. Really happy? I looked around my lake house, thought about my career, my scholarship fund, the life I'd built on my own terms. Yes, Derek. I'm happy. Happier than I've ever been. Silence. Then good. That's good. Goodbye, Michelle. Goodbye, Derek. I blocked the number after hanging up. That chapter was closed, the last page turned, the book shelved forever. 2 years after the divorce, I stood in my Lakehouse office on a Tuesday morning, preparing for a video conference with the Goldman Sachs executive board. The sun streamed through windows I'd cleaned myself that morning, catching on the Crystal Award I'd received for excellence in global financial strategy. My company had grown to 28 employees. The scholarship fund had helped 15 women pursue their dreams. I'd been featured in Forbes, Fortune, and the Harvard Business Review. I'd written a book about building success while protecting your assets, which had become required reading in several MBA programs. But more than any professional achievement, I'd learned something invaluable, that the greatest success isn't measured in money or accolades, but in the ability to stand alone, protect what's yours, and refuse to be diminished by people who can't celebrate your light. Derek had tried to steal my Lakehouse. Instead, he'd given me something far more valuable, the realization that I never needed him or anyone else to validate my worth. The video call connected, and I smiled at the screen full of executives waiting for my strategic insights. This was my life now. Built by me, protected by me, celebrated by people who actually valued what I brought to the table. As I began my presentation, I caught a glimpse of the lake through my window. Constant, faithful, reflecting nothing but truth. Just like me. Epilogue. 5 years later, I sat at a different desk in a different office, the CEO suite of Morrison Financial Group, now a multinational consulting firm with offices in Chicago, Hong Kong, London, and Singapore. The Lakehouse remained my sanctuary, the place I retreated to when I needed to remember where I came from and how far I'd traveled. Derek had remarried, I'd heard through the Whisper network, a woman who worked in his new firm's accounting department. They lived modestly in Connecticut, and by all accounts, he'd learned to appreciate a partner who didn't threaten his ego. Brandon and Tiffany had divorced. She'd left him for someone with actual career prospects. He still lived with Patricia, now helping her with the house in exchange for free rent. But their stories were footnotes in my history, barely worth mentioning, except as a reminder of what I'd overcome. The real story was what I'd built, not just a company or a fortune, but a legacy. The Morrison Scholarship had helped 127 women pursue careers in finance. 3 of them now worked for my firm. 2 had started their own consulting companies. All of them knew that success wasn't something to apologize for, that ambition wasn't a character flaw, and that protecting what you've built wasn't selfish. It was survival. But the journey to get here hadn't been without its complications. About 3 years after the divorce, I'd received a letter from Derek's attorney. Not about the divorce. That was long settled, but about something I never expected. Derek had been diagnosed with a chronic illness. Nothing terminal, but serious enough to require ongoing treatment and significant medical expenses. His new wife's insurance didn't cover everything, and he was struggling financially. The letter delicately suggested that given my substantial means and our shared history, I might consider helping with medical costs. I read that letter 3 times, sitting in my Lakehouse office with coffee growing cold in my hand. Part of me, the part that had loved him once, that had built a life with him, felt a twinge of sympathy. Another part, the part that remembered every betrayal, every manipulation, every attempt to steal what I'd built, felt absolutely nothing. I called Madison. What are my legal obligations here? None whatsoever. You're divorced. His medical expenses are not your responsibility. You could throw that letter in the trash and never think about it again. But, she paused, but you're not asking about legal obligations. You're asking about moral ones. That's not a question I can answer for you. I spent a week thinking about it. Talked to Sarah, who was predictably outraged. He tried to destroy you, Michelle. Said you don't owe him a single dollar. Talked to my mother, who was more measured. Only you know what you can live with, sweetheart, but don't confuse compassion with obligation. In the end, I wrote a check. Not to Derek, but to a medical charity in his name. Enough to cover 1 year of his treatment costs deposited directly with the hospital. I included a note. This is not reconciliation. This is not forgiveness. This is simply the last thing I will ever do for you. Use it wisely. I never heard if he received it or what he thought. I didn't need to. I'd done what felt right to me, in a way that protected my boundaries while honoring the person I wanted to be, someone who could be kind without being foolish, generous without being used. That same year brought another unexpected development. Patricia reached out through a mutual acquaintance, requesting a meeting. I almost refused immediately, but curiosity got the better of me. We met at a neutral restaurant in downtown Chicago, me in my power suit, fresh from a board meeting, her looking older and somehow diminished in a cardigan that had seen better days. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, and I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she unfolded her napkin. I know I have no right to ask for your time. You don't, I agreed. So why are we here? She took a breath. I was wrong. About everything. About you. About what you represented. About how I treated you during your marriage. I thought you were taking Derek away from us, making him into someone we didn't recognize. But the truth is, you were helping him become someone better. And I couldn't see it. The admission hung between us. I waited, letting her continue. When it all fell apart, when Derek lost everything, I blamed you. It was easier than admitting that we'd raised a son who thought his wife's success was a threat instead of a blessing. Easier than acknowledging that Brandon's failures were our fault too. We'd enabled him his whole life, never making him accountable. Patricia, if you're here hoping for absolution, I'm not. She met my eyes and I saw genuine regret there. I'm here to apologize, sincerely, and to tell you that watching what you've built, seeing how you've succeeded, despite everything we put you through, it's been humbling. You were always enough, Michelle. More than enough. I'm sorry I never told you that when it mattered. I didn't know what to say. This woman who'd spent 8 years making me feel inadequate, who'd questioned my worth at every family gathering, who'd stood by while her sons tried to rob me, she was apologizing. Too late to change the past, but perhaps not too late to change how I carried it forward. I accept your apology, I said finally, but it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't rebuild trust or create a relationship where none can exist now. It just closes the loop, I suppose. She nodded, understanding. That's all I hoped for. Closure. And maybe, she hesitated, maybe you could know that at least one person from that chapter of your life recognizes what they lost when they drove you away. We parted civilly, but without warmth. I walked back to my office feeling oddly lighter, as if some weight I hadn't known I was carrying had finally lifted. Forgiveness, I realized, didn't mean forgetting or excusing. It just meant no longer letting old wounds dictate my present. The business continued to expand. By year 6 post-divorce, Morrison Financial Group had facilitated over $2 billion in mergers and acquisitions. We'd been named one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the nation. I'd been invited to speak at Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton. My book had been translated into 12 languages, but perhaps the most satisfying development came from an unexpected source. One of my scholarship recipients, a brilliant woman named Jasmine Chen, had not only graduated top of her class, but had also started her own venture capital firm focused on funding female-led startups. She called me one afternoon with a proposal. Michelle, I want to create something revolutionary, a fund that specifically backs women who've been underestimated, overlooked, or actively sabotaged in their careers. Women like you were, like I was. Women who've had to fight twice as hard for half the recognition. The idea resonated immediately. I'm listening. I'm calling it the Phoenix Fund because these women are rising from the ashes of other people's attempts to destroy them. I want you as a founding partner. Your expertise, your story, your network. It would be invaluable. We launched the Phoenix Fund 8 months later with $50 million in initial capital, half of it from my personal assets. The first company we funded was a tech startup founded by a woman whose ex-husband had tried to claim ownership of her code because he'd provided emotional support during development. We helped her secure her intellectual property and scale her company. Within 2 years, it was valued at $200 million. The second was a manufacturing company started by a woman whose business partners had attempted to force her out after she refused to accept less equity despite doing more work. We backed her buyout of their shares. Her company now employed 300 people and was the leading supplier in its industry. Story after story, woman after woman, we funded the fighters, the survivors, the ones who refused to be diminished. And with each success, I felt the final pieces of my own healing clicking into place. Derek hadn't just tried to take my Lakehouse. He tried to take my belief in myself, my trust in partnership, my willingness to be vulnerable. But here I was, not just surviving, but creating opportunities for others to thrive. Year 7 brought the kind of recognition I'd never sought, but deeply appreciated. Time magazine named me one of the 100 most influential people in finance. The article detailed my journey, the betrayal, the fight back, the empire I'd built, but it focused more on what came after. The scholarship fund, the Phoenix Fund, the women I'd mentored and supported. The journalist who interviewed me asked a question that made me pause. Do you think Derek Morrison did you a favor in a twisted way? By trying to destroy you, did he actually set you free? I considered it carefully. I think Derek revealed who I really was. Not who he wanted me to be, not who I'd been trying to be to keep peace, but who I actually was underneath all the compromising and accommodation. Did he do me a favor? No. He betrayed me. He tried to steal from me. He attempted to ruin my reputation. Those weren't gifts, they were attacks. But they did force me to defend myself in a way I'd never had to before. They showed me I was stronger than I'd realized. And if you could go back, knowing everything you know now, would you still marry him? I smiled at that, thinking of the woman I'd been at 30, so eager to prove herself worthy of love that she'd accepted crumbs and called it a feast. No, but I can't regret the journey entirely because it led me here, to this life, this work, this version of myself that doesn't apologize for success or shrink to make others comfortable. Derek was a painful teacher, but the lessons were invaluable. That interview went viral in ways I never expected. Women reached out by the thousands, sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival. Some were still in the thick of it, gathering courage to leave. Others had left years ago and found my story validating. All of them reminded me why this work mattered. I started a podcast, Building After Betrayal, featuring interviews with women who'd overcome family sabotage, professional undermining, or relationship betrayals to build extraordinary lives. Each episode ended with the same question: what would you tell your younger self, the one still trapped in that situation? The answers varied, but the themes were consistent. Trust yourself. Document everything. Protect your assets. Know your worth. Don't let anyone convince you that your success is the problem. Their insecurity is. Meanwhile, Derek's life had settled into a quiet, unremarkable routine. His second marriage was stable by all accounts. He worked steadily at his small firm. He'd apparently found peace in mediocrity, in being the smaller fish in a very small pond. Sometimes I wondered if he ever thought about what we could have built together if he'd chosen partnership over competition, celebration over resentment. But mostly, I didn't think about him at all. Brandon's story was less redemptive. After Tiffany left him, he'd spiraled further. Patricia finally insisted he get therapy, which reportedly helped, but his career never recovered. He worked a series of odd jobs, never staying anywhere long. The last I heard, he was managing a sporting goods store and living alone in a studio apartment. The man who'd once demanded my Lakehouse for his wedding now could barely afford rent. Tiffany had reinvented herself. Again, she'd abandoned the influencer dream and was apparently working in real estate, using the same manipulative charm that had once helped her nearly steal my home to sell overpriced condos to unsuspecting buyers. Some people never really change. They just find new venues for old behaviors. But their stories were footnotes in my narrative, barely worth the mental energy it took to recall them. The real story continued to be what I was building: a business empire. A legacy of supporting other women, a life so full and rich that the past felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. On the 10-year anniversary of my divorce, I threw a party at the Lakehouse. Not a celebration of the divorce itself, but of the decade of growth that followed. I invited everyone who'd supported me through it all. Sarah, Madison, my mother, my team from Morrison Financial Group, the scholarship recipients, the Phoenix Fund partners, the women I'd mentored, and the ones who'd mentored me. We filled the house with laughter and music, food and wine. At one point, standing on my deck overlooking the lake, surrounded by extraordinary women who'd all overcome their own versions of betrayal, I felt overwhelmingly grateful. Not for what Derek had done. Never for that, but for what I discovered about myself in the aftermath. Sarah found me there, looking contemplative. Penny, for your thoughts? I was just thinking about how much has changed. 10 years ago, I was fighting for this house, for my dignity, for my right to exist a successful woman without apology. And now, I gestured to the party, to the life I'd built. Now I'm not fighting anymore. I've already won. You've done more than win, Sarah said. You've transformed the battlefield entirely. You're not just successful, you're creating paths for others to be successful too. That's legacy, Michelle. That's immortality. Later that evening, after the guests had left and I was alone with the gentle sound of waves, my phone buzzed with an email. The subject line made my heart skip. A letter you don't have to read. It was from Derek. I stared at that subject line for a long moment, my finger hovering over delete, but curiosity won, as it so often does. Michelle, I know I have no right to reach out. I know you've moved on, built an incredible life, become someone even more remarkable than you were when we were married. I see your success in the news. Read about the Phoenix Fund, watch from a distance as you change the world. I'm writing this not because I expect a response, but because my therapist suggested I might find peace in expressing thoughts I've carried for years. You deserved better than what I gave you. You deserved a partner who celebrated your success instead of resenting it, who saw your ambition as beautiful instead of threatening. I was so caught up in my own insecurities, so convinced that your light was somehow diminishing mine, that I couldn't see the truth. We could have both shined. The Lakehouse situation, Brandon's greed, my family's entitlement, I could have stopped all of it. Should have stopped it. Instead, I enabled it, encouraged it, participated in it. I told myself I was being a good brother, a good son. Really, I was just being a terrible husband. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve the peace of knowing you've read this, but I needed you to know. You were never the problem. Your success was never the problem. I was the problem. My inadequacy, my jealousy, my absolute failure to be the partner you deserved. You've become everything I always knew you could be, and I'm genuinely happy for you. From a distance, with no claim on your life or your happiness, I'm proud of what you've built, and I'm sorry, deeply, profoundly sorry, for trying to tear it down. Be well, Michelle. You've earned every bit of your extraordinary life. Derek. I read it twice, then set my phone down and looked out at the lake. The moon was full, painting the water in silver, and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no vindication. Just a quiet sense of closure. Derek's apology didn't change the past. Didn't undo the hurt or reclaim the years I'd spent recovering from his betrayal. But it did confirm something I'd come to believe. That the best revenge really was living well. So well that even your betrayers had to acknowledge it. I didn't respond to the email. Didn't need to. Derek's peace wasn't my responsibility anymore. His growth, his therapy, his journey toward being better, that was his work to do, and I was no longer part of it. Instead, I opened a new document on my laptop and began writing. Not a response to Derek, but a letter to every woman who'd ever been told her success was the problem, her ambition was unattractive, her achievements were threatening. Dear extraordinary woman, I began. If someone is trying to diminish you, steal from you, or convince you that your light is too bright, that's not love. That's sabotage, and you deserve so much better. The letter grew into an article, which grew into a speech I delivered at the Women in Finance Summit 3 months later. That speech was viewed over 10 million times online. It became a rallying cry for women refusing to apologize for their success. And through it all, the Lakehouse stood as my sanctuary, my reminder, my proof that fighting for yourself is always worth it. Every sunrise over the lake validated the choice I'd made to protect what was mine. Every sunset confirmed that walking away from people who diminish you isn't failure. It's the greatest success of all. I built an empire. I protected it. I grew it. And I used it to lift other women up so they wouldn't have to fight as hard as I did. That's not just my story. That's my legacy. And it started the day I said no to people who thought my success was theirs to redistribute. My home was theirs to claim. My life was theirs to control. It started the day I chose myself. I never saw Derek watching my property again. Never heard from Patricia or Brandon or Tiffany. They'd faded into irrelevance, exactly as they deserved. Sometimes late at night, I'd get emails from women who'd read my story. Women dealing with their own versions of Derek. Their own families who saw their success as communal property to be distributed. I'd write back to each one, sharing the same advice. Document everything. Protect your assets. Trust your instincts. And remember, you don't owe anyone access to what you've built, especially people who refuse to celebrate your success. The people who truly love you will never ask you to be smaller to make them feel bigger. That's the real lesson in all of this. Not revenge, not vindication, but the simple truth that the only person whose approval you need is your own. I built an empire. I protected it. I grew it. And I did it all without compromising who I was or what I deserved. That's not revenge. That's justice. And it tastes so much sweeter than any vindictive victory ever could. The end. If this story resonated with you, remember, your success is not a burden to carry quietly. It's a crown to wear proudly. Never let anyone convince you that making yourself smaller is the price of keeping the peace. The right people will celebrate your growth, and the wrong ones will reveal themselves by trying to cut you down. Choose yourself, protect yourself, and never, ever apologize for being extraordinary.